So I wanted to do texture blending first, which is something that's been mapped out thoroughly and really investigated from a scientific perspective by Birchstar, who is here with us today. Yay! And her work was outstanding. When she took me down into her workshop, I first saw the typical voxel workshop with like little experiments and doodads going on, and a really cool staircase, 45-degree angle staircase, which looks perfectly normal, and you don't realize there's anything exceptional about it until you realize how hard it is to build on a 45-degree angle and go up at a diagonal and make stairs. And I go down and I'm like just looking around because I'm nosy, and I don't even ask, I'm just like go down. I see just rows upon rows upon rows of these little frames, and there's like grass growing out of some of them, and there's snow on some of them, and I'm like thinking, what is this? I've never seen anything like this before, but it's literally like as far as my eyes can see, just rows upon rows and little neat, they're ordered clearly by some sort of pattern. And she explains that she's basically doing a actual like in-game spreadsheet of texture blending and has mapped it out, and it was just phenomenal. I mean, I tweeted it, and I don't think anyone knew what they were looking at, because I didn't know what I was looking at when I first looked at it, but it was so cool. And then she did a post on it, and I don't think a lot of people really like looked at it super hard. I think a lot of people maybe thought it was just about texture bleeding being sucky or something like that, but it wasn't. So she has developed a way to make lumicite blend, and we wanted to show that to you tonight because I think it's so cool that I really hope that enough people learn it that it can actually become a feature in the way textures work in the game. So it's easier to show it than say it, as I say. So I think everybody's pretty much here. We're 8 after, so let's go ahead and get started, and we'll show how to do it. So if you want to pick a square or a rectangle, since I got distracted and didn't draw another line over there, I'll set up here in this middle one. And I'm just gonna make a box here. I'm gonna fill it with tin, because as she explained to me, the new worked metal textures absolutely will not bleed. They won't blend, you can't force them to, but almost everything else can. So we use this, and then we're going to draw on it with some lumicite, and we want to make sure there's at least a voxel between all the lumicite dots. So I'm just going to do, I've got the most of here. I'm going to do this in a checkerboard pattern. I hope I don't screw this up. Okay, so there are 3 textures in the stone. You scroll all the way down to stone over in your dirts and everything, but in the actual stone section of stone, you scroll all the way down and you have 3 textures: desert cavern wall, desert cavern floor, and desert cavern ceiling. These will allow lumicite to blend together, and it's very predictable in the way it works. Okay, so Birch says more than 1 voxel between, and with lumicite at least you'll see the middle texture. So sometimes if you get a little too crazy with it, like I was earlier when I was making, I made the world's most psychedelic flower. It's down here: desert cavern wall, desert cavern floor, and desert cavern ceiling. These can force certain textures to blend together. Like it can make obsidian. Yeah, well, you can make gem textures not bleed. You put other voxels between them that don't have a texture. But it would be nice if we had basically all textures set to be like gold, and I'll do gold here. You know, gold will blend kind of softly at the edges, right? So what if we had all textures be like that? We had all textures be like gold, where if you put gold and wood together, you will get a tiny bit of streaking, right? And here you can see the voxel that was between, right? I've blended those together. But gold with, let's see, what makes gold bleed? Like I can put a gemstone next to gold, and it'll eventually, if I put enough gold and that gemstone together, I'm going to get one blending into the other. So gold is capable of bleeding, but it doesn't always, right? It would be nice if that's how all textures were, and then we had, like, all of them, even the gemstones, and then we had, you know, a neutral texture that was capable of forcing blending at the edges, so we could soften the edges of textures. Yeah, gold bleeds with most natural textures. And you see how I just forced gold to blend with this, the desert cavern wall, because it is a natural texture, so that would happen normally. But you can force obsidian to blend when you get it next to the... Why is that bar so big all of a sudden? So now I've blended obsidian. I'm going to pick up my desert cavern here. I'm going to blend obsidian back into gold. So you can get nice, rounded, soft borders between things instead of harsh lines. You can even get, you know, the neon rainbow effect. But you have to remember to have one of the newer textures that has been specifically made, and I think all the raw wood textures also resist bleeding, which is kind of a paradox. And that was striped wood that's been processed, and that's raw wood. Raw wood won't bleed. That didn't make sense, but it's kind of backwards. And you can get let's get some red here. Let me get some more space to paint on. And you can also make it have a scaled look. I gotta remember to paint with 10 or something that'll be a neutral barrier, otherwise you end up with it going crazy and all over the place. So I want to do... She did dragon scales earlier, that looked cool, so I'll do that. I forgot to paint that. Keep getting an error was encountered while trying to build, and I'm just trying to paint it with 10. Yeah, that was a ridiculously long video I made on how to make textures not bleed, because I wanted to kind of highlight how ridiculous it was to do it. So maybe we get something fixed. So I've got my red lumicite. Like that. That's probably too close. Oops. I didn't do it right. I'm not even sure it can go this way. Oh, yeah, it can. And you can get a super cool look here, where you're getting the red streak, and you're doing it on purpose instead of just you're at the mercy of whatever the voxels want to do, whatever they feel like doing that day. Let's see what everyone else has gotten up to. Yeah, Birch, you're gonna need to do your scaling things. I just made it look like Argyle socks. Is it Argyle or it's Argyle? So I've introduced Argyle socks to the world of Landmark. I managed to make a letter N earlier, just using this by making the textures blend in a certain way. And if I had more time, I would make an alphabet off of that. Now keep in mind that that's worked cobalt there, that's not going to blend. Like nothing you can do will make it blend. Okay, here she's doing the scaled pattern. Okay, I didn't have enough obsidian between.
Just a matter of fact, getting those textures to bleed and look that nicely, that's really awesome. It's a really good find.
Okay, that's the pattern for the scales. I'm going to find the post that she made so everyone can go bump it and say, yes, we want a control way to do this in the game, because honestly, I think if we could force that, can you imagine how cool paintings and stuff would be? How easy it would be to paint sculptures. If you've ever made a big sculpture, you realize that painting it is actually the harder part of it. It's not the sculpting, it's the actually getting it to be painted and not look like complete rubbish. This is the post, and it's, I mean, just a magnificent work there, figuring all this out, all the different ways, all the different combinations of what blends with what, sorry, and how it will blend, like if it doesn't blend, if it's consistently blending, if it's kind of a wild blend like you see with some stuff like dirt and ice and sand where it just kind of goes all over the place. That's wild. I love this. So that looks really cool to me. And I want to combine this with a tutorial Kit's going to do, because you can get it to show up on small voxels too, not just big. Yeah, see, that's a vertical section boundary. So this is a texture change area. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen that when you're painting with something that has a heavy texture to it, like a tile or a trim. It has like kind of a random element to where it puts its texturing and you can see it. And I would guess this is actually part of the mesh too, and you would be able to see where the boundary is by mapping that out. What was I going to do? Oh, yeah. So you can also do it with smaller voxels. Man, I need to remake my strings someday. I still have these from Alpha. The ones I made, they're so dirty. I can like see that they're all crooked now because I know better. Back when I made them, I was like, "Wee, I am awesome! I made tiny voxels." And now I'm like, but they're crooked on one side. So I can put that, and then let's try blending indigo. Let's be dark elves. I don't know if this will work. Okay, that was freaking cool. You can actually make lettering with this by controlling the blending. There, I just made a copyright. Copyright. Birchstar. I don't know about you guys, but I'm gonna be probably playing with this for a long time. Yep, just a minute, we'll get it out. This is a pretty good time to start playing the game because it's still in closed beta. Um, happened there? That looks cool. How'd I do that? Yep, I can really. I mean, somebody who's got a better eye for like optical art and stuff like that. Yeah, obsidian doesn't need to be forced to blend with ice. It was actually stucco that I was putting in there, and I got distracted from looking at over here to read what someone said, and forgot that I was pasting in a string. I thought I was painting. That was a derp. Alright, so I think we're going to. Is there. Oh, let me show the rainbow stripe. Because that's the coolest thing ever. Who doesn't love rainbows? If you don't love rainbows, then you're mean. And then we're going to move this into the next section. Thank you for the follows. We're going to combine this with a really kind of simple yet very useful and cool technique of kits. And we're going to paint what he makes with this. Because I think it's going to look really badass. Let's see. Rainbows start with red. But we have pink, so I guess it has to start with pink. And then I wanted to put white in between each color to make something really obnoxious, look like, you know, a clown barf stick or something. definitely truly erase. What do you mean, are they truly erase? I'm just fighting words. Alright. I didn't make it a full rainbow, because we're going to go to the next step soon. Except to make these blend, I would have to actually get another voxel in there, right? To do that, have you ever tried sticking a ZVV in between these that are cavern? Because I was thinking about that earlier, like what happens. A ZVV is basically any voxel that completely disappears along one axis of plane, like one line of sight. And you can insert it in between other voxels without it actually taking up space because of that. Sometimes they're completely invisible. So I thought earlier, like, what happens if I do that? Oh, that's cool. I can actually make a gradient scale in the reds. And when you see it go black like that, that means it's rendering too much of the cavern wall. You haven't given it enough space to blend properly, I think. That's interesting, because, I mean, the reason you use this particular shape, because it disappears along one plane of sight. You see, if I move my screen, it's gone. The reason you use this shape is to stop blending. Like, if you don't want two colors to blend, you'd put it between your amethyst and your sapphire or whatever before we had, nice textures. We still don't have a purple, but now it kind of does the opposite. It looks really weird. Okay, so now we're going to do Kit's technique, and we're going to apply Birchstar's paint blending to it, because I think it'll look really cool. So I want to first look at what everyone's doing. Okay, that's cool. Oh, this is an easy CVV to use properly, because it's basically a square and you just stick it in between things. It acts just like a really tiny microvoxel, so you don't have to do anything fancy to make it work. As you can see, it's just invisible on one axis. So you put it in between amethyst and sapphire, for instance. In fact, I can show that really quick. I've got yeah, everyone's making like clown vomit paintings at their own claims now, I'm sure, and I just think that's awesome, because I think Lumicite is too bright, and this is a way to make it actually be attractive. So this is how you would stop blending in the old days, before we had when we didn't have textures that were worked and would separate. Oops. For some reason, my texture just disappeared and I didn't Control Z. I'm not really sure what happened there. Let me try this again. I'm getting an error was encountered when trying to build a lot. I think they've introduced some new feature of the game, possibly to do with building together, and I think it was to kind of enforce Player Studio IP protection, so you couldn't, get a template and give it out to everybody. And it might have something to do with Vox View. So I've noticed a lot of lag when I have that open. Okay, so in the old days, you would just like kind of put some textures together and hope they don't blend, but then you put something like sapphire in. Somebody's Control Z is undoing mine. But you see you get these weird streaks, and that's actually behaving really, really well for sapphire. So normally sapphire just kind of goes all over the. I'm talking without pushing down push to talk. This particular voxel, however, can't be made anymore without using a special technique, and it uses the line tool, which may or may not be changing. And it's still very fiddly to use. So overall, I think it'd be better if they just did something more reasonable for bleeding. Yeah, usually I do sapphire and ruby, but I didn't want to find it. But that's how you do a zero volume voxel to stop something from bleeding the other. But still, I really like the way that you can get a soft blend with Birchstar's method. And I really hope you guys go look at that thread and read through it and just give your input, and maybe the developers will look at it and see that, you know, this is a feature that would be really great to have. I think this is really cool. See, I'm so glad that I met you and I learned this from you, because it's awesome. Alright, so let's apply this